Welcome to Creating a Disruption, the podcast that focuses on ways to disrupt the traditional classroom by using engaging teaching and learning strategies. I am Brian Hall, Associate Professor of English and Coordinator of Studio 101 on the Metro Campus of Cuyahoga Community College. And with me are co-hosts, Kara DePaul, Director of Academic Professional Development. Today's guest is Professor Trista Powers, Assistant Professor of English, who has been with the college for 11 years. The first question, Professor Powers, how do you actively engage students in your classes? And also, welcome, and thank you for doing this.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This is a good change of pace for me in my life. I've never done a podcast, so I'm really honored that you guys selected me to be here today. So I try to approach having students think about writing from as much of a practical standpoint as I can. And I use what I would think of as everyday kind of scenarios, activities that tap into things that they may be exposed to on an everyday basis, whether it's them scrolling through their phone on Twitter or them watching YouTube. So that's the technology piece of it. So one of the most recent assignments that I had given my students for my English 1020 classes, I had my students identify a song that they felt resonated with them and that would have resonance with the other students in the class and post it on the discussion board. And they had to write about how the song had to be reflective of some sort of social issue. And so they had to select a song that I, felt falls within the criteria of a social issue, but also has some sort of element of a proposed solution encapsulated within the song because they were writing a proposal essay. And so for me to engage them in writing a proposal essay, they have to understand how is it incorporated into our everyday lives through these real case scenarios through songs, right? Songwriting, artists, they are illustrating how social issues affect us on a regular basis through their songs. So to me, this was one of the most relatable ways to engage them. And what I found was some of the most powerful examples of songs that they've selected that were eclectic. They were just moving and poignant songs, artists from every genre, every decade represented. And so the students in writing their responses about how these social issues were reflected in the song, and then why were they compelled to share this song. And the responses were just insightful and, to me, just evocative. And it made me think, wow, like I learned about different types of songs and genres of songs and artists that I had never heard of. So one of the ways that I wanted to further engage them, because some of them didn't post the song. They just put the song title and the artist and they wrote about the song. So I thought, well, this will be a really good opportunity for me to create like a repository on Blackboard where I can have a folder where I go on YouTube and I gather all the songs that they talked about on the discussion board, include this in like in a clearinghouse on Blackboard, and they can go and jam out to those songs or reflect on those songs, journal to those songs, listen to those songs throughout the entire semester. So as I'm going on YouTube, finding, these songs to post in this folder, I'm like crying as I'm watching these videos and listening to these artists. I'm crying because I'm thinking, oh my goodness, this song is like striking a chord with me in a way I never would have thought of. I never would have learned about this song had my students not written about it or and introduced it to us as a class. And it engaged me in a different way as an educator. And so I always subscribe to this each one, teach one, kind of pedagogy, because I think sometimes some students feel that they may not have as much to contribute in terms of knowledge because they are the student. So they feel like they default to receiving the knowledge, but not always feeling like they have to be empowered to share their knowledge. And so I always tell students, you have knowledge to share. You have to activate it in ways that I feel like is going to help you feel empowered the most. And that's one of the ways that I've done that. So that was one of the coolest teaching moments I've had, and I would say in my career.
No, that's fantastic. I love connecting with students with music because I feel like that's one of the like a common thing that we can talk about in some ways. My question is, when you introduce this, do students do they know immediately like the song they're going to use, or is it I never really I like this song, but I never really actually listened to the lyrics of it. Did that ever happen?
You know what? No, every response that every student for the most part said they immediately gravitated towards the song. Like they knew exactly what song they wanted to write about, only because they had listened to the song on repeat.
Right.
And also it's almost like a soundtrack to their lives, so to speak. So because they're so familiar with the song, they already know what the in-depth nature of the content and what it did for them and how maybe it lifted their spirits or inspired them or galvanized them or induced them to do something in their communities. So these were already like at the forefront of their minds. And they probably, listened to that song maybe that week before they even got the assignment and thought, oh, this is perfect. So they wrote eloquently to the point where they're like, this is how it impacted me prior to this assignment. And this is how I feel like it relates to the assignment. So I didn't see any students who were like, oh, okay, this is an opportunity for me to go back and re-examine. They were like right spot on with this is what my analysis is, because they were already kind of attuned to the analysis they had been doing prior to that assignment. So I think it's pretty amazing. I think it speaks to the fact that when we have music that really, strikes a chord with us, we do some natural analysis because we may think about how it relates to our personal lives, or we may listen to the song to kind of get us through maybe some harsh times in our lives. If it's a song that's more melancholy, I'll tell you, John Mayer, he's one of my favorite all-time artists. And my 13-year-old, she used to request I play all of the John Mayer album. That she would say, well, I love his music. Can you play it to help me go to sleep at night? So she would request this at 8 or 9 years old, because she sometimes would be up and she's like, I can't really go to sleep. And so play lullaby music at 8 or 9 years old. And she would say, well, I want, John Mayer, because for her, it made her feel relaxed and calm. And she used to go to sleep to it. And I think part of it has to do with the fact that when I was pregnant with her in the delivery room, the pain, I mean, listen, childbirth pain is just a whole nother level of I couldn't even sit still. It was so painful. So my husband played the John Mayer album, multiple albums over the span of his career. I like several songs off of multiple albums of his, and I immediately calmed down. And so it made sense. And she was the one that I was giving birth to, that I listened to this John Mayer songs to kind of help calm me down during childbirth with her. And she requested those same songs when she was, 8 or 9. But as she listened to them over time, she and I would have dialogue about those songs. So I know that because of the fact that I've had conversations with her about one of my favorite artists, I could easily write, a proposal essay about what he's proposing in multiple songs that he writes about or sings about, So, yeah.
I think the point is so well taken in terms of we want our students to, let's just say, be academics, right? To be able to live with the subject. And you're getting at they have been living with the subject, especially if they have a big musician band and they know so much about it that they can sit down and go, like you said, they analyze it, they understand it, they talk about it with their friends. That's exactly what we want them to be able to do. And it's great that you're getting them to that point by using material that is really familiar to them. And I just want to say, with using music, when I teach the honors class, I always have students, they draw a self-portrait at the beginning of every class, and on the back, they write down a favorite song. And then I have a Spotify playlist where I just have all of it. So through the years, the playlist is right around 500 songs. And it's interesting to go back through it, is it becomes these moments of, I remember the student who wanted to play that song.
Wow.
Right? It takes me back to these different moments, and it becomes really meaningful to them. So I'm glad that assignment sounds like it does work so well with those students.
Yeah,
So,
and I think it also helped them to see how, like, their musical interests within the scope of the class. Like, this person listens to Kendrick Lamar, and this person's listening to this artist, and so they get to see, like, wow, we have a wide array of musical tastes in this class, and how cool is it that I can listen to a rock song when I'm normally not a person who would gravitate towards a rock song. Songs teach us so much about history, teaches us so much about community, and it's just a great conduit to, I think, how we can allow students to use that form of what they're used to, they're used to that element of being in a world where they are given, time to kind of mull over these songs, right? Because music is such an integral part of American culture, right? But so when they get to college and they're asked to write a college essay that they're not familiar with, they're like, some students put up an immediate guard in that, I can't write this. I don't know what social issue to write about. I have no idea how to incorporate these writing principles in ways that you're asking me. And so to me, this assignment was very much at bridge to allowing them to do that, and also being able to write about content that they were already used to kind of having some level of knowledge about.
This was done in an online class, right?
This was done in an online class.
Discussion
Yes.
post. So I just think about, sometimes, I don't know if any of you have ever experienced this, but you do a discussion board post and you think they're all going to interact with each other and, comment on each other's, posts or whatever. And sometimes the engagement just either not there or maybe feels like a little bit, kind of forced, right?
Yeah.
They're just replying because they have to do as part of the grade, part of the assignment. I would think that now you're taking a universal language, right, in music, and you're looking at it through like the spoken word, the written word, the lyrics of it, right, and giving them the opportunity to talk with each other. Like, did you find that you got kind of more response and engagement from the students, like responding to each other more than on other discussion board posts that you've done?
So that's the next step to this assignment, is that inviting them to listen to each other's songs and then responding to each other's posts with the idea being that they share their reflections. Perhaps those reflections align with someone else, who originally posted their response about the song. But also gives them an opportunity to see how much there is like this shared, experience. So this person who initially posted the song, they love the song, obviously, enough to post it. But then the person who was being introduced to maybe they fall in love with the song. Now you have a shared connection with a peer in your class. And that builds community. And I'm all about building community in my class because I feel like everybody should feel affirmed in their talents and their knowledge, in their culture. It helps give them a sense of empowerment, knowing that they have each other to kind of support each other through, because it's hard being a student. We all sitting here, we're students, and I know for me, I remember feeling, when I went to campus for the first time in college, going to my very first class. I remember being so nervous, by the way. I started at Ohio University, but I remember being so nervous before my first day of class. The Sunday before, I actually mapped out where all my classes were. And so I went to every single building the day before. And I thought to myself, okay, I can do this. So I had a political science class for my very first class. It was like a 9 a.m. class on a Monday. So I walked to the room, and mind you, I went the Sunday before, and it's a theater style classroom. at that point, you're like, oh, it's a theater style classroom, not a big deal. You're thinking it's like going to be 10 kids in the class, 10 students like high school. I get there on the first day and it's literally like 100 people in the room. And at that point, that room is automatically transformed in my mind because I go into an empty room on that day before to only go to the room where it's like completely filled up with people. And I was so intimidated. Just the sheer volume and nature and the size of the classroom with the number of people kind of made me think, oh, am I going to get lost in this, sea of like other students? Is this professor going to know my name? Am I going to be able to do the work if I don't have someone I can connect with? And it turns out I was fine. I sat in the front row. Someone always told me, like, they gave me advice before I started college. Always sit in the front row. The professor will always know your name, or at least most of the time they will. And you can take good notes and you can ask questions, and you don't have to be that person in the back raising your hand and then perhaps not being seen because you're in the back of the room. So I took all that advice and I put it to action, and I think it worked out well for me. I got an A in the class. So.
I think that's so important too, like in the context of like Tri-C, like I think about last semester I was teaching business communications at West, and half the class, there was several CCP students, and then there were half the class that were, adult professionals coming and taking, their class after hours, and a couple of them had a previous business class together, and they kind of automatically just gravitated towards each other. Right, because they had been in a previous class together. And so when I kind of saw those relationships developing, I was like, okay, now this half the room was the little bit more shy. They hadn't quite made those connections yet. So what can we do to create that kind of community in the classroom? Because they're coming, they're transient in the sense that they're coming and taking classes and then going home to their, to their worlds. They're not living on campus, making those kind of connections. So talk a little bit more about like what else you do in your classes to build that kind of community right off the bat, or maybe throughout the semester, and how that looks in your online or even in your face-to-face classes.
Yeah, it's a good question because it's not easy to take folks who are coming from various walks of life. They're all in the same class, and then when you walk in as a professor, there could be silence. You have to break that silence up. So you kind of have to figure out ways of how am I going to get that first student to talk and break up the silence of the class, because and I tell them I don't want to be a person that's hearing my own voice the entire class. Like, that's not fun. And I'm sure that you guys would want to hear from each other. So I used to have a variety of activities that I would do at the very beginning of the semester. One of the activities I love to do the most was it's an activity called All My Neighbors. So, and it's kind of a interactive activity where they had to get up out of their seats. We had to move chairs and tables in the classroom and configure the classroom to a point where we could have them stand in a circle. They all are facing each other, obviously, and I would shout out all my neighbors who like the Cleveland Browns. And at that point, I was hoping we have at least 2 or 3 people.
They all put their heads down and look somewhere else.
Well, it's interesting. 10 years ago, yeah. So it was like, you kind of had to, it was like pulling teeth to get the people to be like, yeah, I'm a Browns fan, because at that point we were underperforming as a football team, but as the past couple years have happened, there are more fans, I would say, who are gladly and proudly proclaiming their Brown fandom. So anyway, so they would have to move spots within the circle if that particular question applied to them, or if they felt like it was something that resonated with them, and so I would throw out 3 or 4 questions, and you would have such movement within the circle, and it would actually allow them to see what are some common interests or common ground that they share with each other. And at that point, you get, the sense of humor starts to come out, and people start laughing, and the ice really does start breaking at that point. And then they start to learn about each other in ways that I think an activity like that doesn't allow for. Or does allow for, and I sense that whenever I did that, there was an immediate calm. Like, okay, we can do this college thing. We can come to school. We can be here with each other and have a good time and learn at the same time. So that was one activity. Then I did another activity where there's a game called Taboo. Have you guys played this board game before?
I'm familiar with that game.
Are you?
Same. Why have we not played this before?
Have you guys played the blank slate game?
No.
Oh my goodness. That's like the next iteration of Taboo for like now.
I don't know. I mean, you say taboo and I start sweating immediately.
You have to play blank slate. It's the coolest game. It's a language game. I'm actually thinking about doing that for the fall semester. But basically I would bring my Taboo game into class. I would hand out the cards and I put the students in groups. I hand out the cards. And one of the rules that I would tell them is, of course, share the game rules. But I would also tell them, while you guys are playing, just think about how audience works, right? Because that game, Brian, you and I being English professors, we know that we teach our students that they have to write to a specific audience. But for some students, that's so abstract. So, like, they don't know exactly what that means. But when you put them in the context of like playing Taboo, they have to immediately know, if I don't say the right, if I don't say the right words or phrases to activate like this person's guess correctly, then I'm going to be going on forever, right? And then you only got so much time before somebody, and then you can't repeat the words that are on the card. So like, they knew all that.
Is that what's making you sweat?
Yes.
Time?
So were you a good Taboo player?
Oh no.
Oh, right.
No, not by any stretch of the imagination.
Was it the time element?
Oh yeah, well yeah.
Yeah.
Because that's stressful.
It is stressful. You gotta think quick on your feet.
And which I cannot do. So I'm just sitting here sweating now. Look at the time. My goodness.
So are you recalling times where you perhaps didn't, fare so well in the game, or?
This podcast is about you.
No, I get it. It's one of those games where you feel like you're in a pressure cooker because you have time. Then you have to be inventive with what you share with your group that, are supposed to be helping you guess the word. And you have to recall knowledge. So it's happening, like all of these different moving parts are happening within this vacuum at one point in one time. And it can be a little bit stressful. And I found that the students were up for the pressure. So they would be laughing, they'd be talking, and I didn't know about this. And so they would be learning from each other about these specific words based on what they were sharing with their peers on what to guess for the word. They'd be using, knowledge and information and facts that maybe their group hadn't known before that particular game. So that was another way that I did a lot of engagement. And I'm all about tactile learning because I'm a hands-on learner. And I do believe that like when you use more sensory-based learning, it kind of sticks a little bit more too.
Yeah, so you've mentioned, okay, so you're physically getting them into spaces, right? Like moving desks, having them walk around the room, playing games. So like, are you doing this in a typical Metro classroom? Mm-hmm. Are you doing this here at the studio? And like, what kind of like, do you think about that at the start of the semester of like your classrooms that you're requesting or?
Absolutely, definitely. And I've used Studio 101 several times. We did a walking gallery in Studio 101. So I don't know if you guys are familiar with the walking gallery, but basically you give Post-it notes to students.
Oh, yeah.
And you ask a question and they write an answer and then they post their answers on the wall. And then everyone has to stand up and walk around and read each other's answers. So that, the walking gallery, it gets them up moving, gets them kind of engaged in like within the physical space in that kind of way. And I used Studio 101 because it was perfect, because it was enough room for them to do that. It was, to me, it's a space conducive, obviously, naturally to creativity. So I feel like for some reason, when you pass that threshold into Studio 101, the creativity element automatically goes up because it's invited to be. So I think in a traditional classroom, you really got to work extra harder as an educator to get that creativity out of people. But when you have a space like this, you get there's like you plug in right away because the materials are there. The space is set up so that it's such, and it gives students more open-mindedness on what they can say and do.
Thank you for that plug.
Yeah, I love Studio 101. It's to me one of the biggest additions in terms of resources that we've had to the campus. So hats off to you, Brian. You know, you led the charge in that regard.
Well,
So
you as well, because
I was right there with. I didn't want to toot my own horn.
Yeah, right.
I can't be the one to toot my own horn.
You were setting up for me to toot for it.
That's right.
I appreciate your
Yeah.
support for this space as well, even from the very beginning. So talking a little bit about spaces and going back to the online space and how to get students even more involved, because I know we talked about discussion boards can be difficult, getting connections can be difficult. Do you do any other activities just in the online environment that you feel have really helped to create that community? Because I can see the music one absolutely happening. Are there other ones that you build off of from that, or other activities that you do that you really see students interacting at a level that maybe others don't see in an online environment because it's so difficult to get that engagement piece?
Yeah, so with online, you have to be more thinking outside the box. And I say that because the students who are the online students, they only have they're logging in, they're accessing the materials, they're learning the materials, and then they're logging out. And so because it's asynchronous, it's happening at the time that's most convenient for them. So it's not like we're all in the same classroom at the same time, on the same day. So one person may be logging out while another person is logging in. So it's sometimes a little bit of a challenge when not everybody's online at the same time. So one of the things that I like to do is I really like to engage students in using the discussion board, but I have to find kind of a variety of approaches to ensure that the discussion board is, it's a opportunity or place for them to feel they can converse. And you kind of have to sometimes remind students, go in and respond to your peers' work, even if it's an assignment that has points attached to it. You still kind of have to incentivize them sometimes, like, hey guys, I noticed that there's not a lot of activity happening on the receiving end for some of you guys responding to your classmates' discussion board posts. So one of the things I had done in the past, and I think is, it worked pretty well, is giving them like a partner at the beginning of the semester. So I did this for a peer review one time, where they had to have they had a partner that I assigned to them at the beginning of the semester, and they were kind of interacting with each other throughout the semester. So they would, look at each other's essays and give feedback. But then also they were responsible for kind of encouraging each other throughout the semester, or making sure that they paid attention to what their partner was saying and then responding in return, so that there's always at least there's like a cohort within the class, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So that they didn't feel like, and if I never had any students, I always, made sure I explained to students, if you have a student who's not interacting, not engaging with you, I would always find ways to reassign them a partner or something, but that was very, very rare. But the kind of cohort model within the class, I think, was really, really cool and successful from the standpoint it kind of gave them an opportunity to see how each other grew throughout the semester, whether it was through their writing or whether it was them being able to teach each other the writing principles that were being taught that week. It kind of gave them a support system within each other.
It's almost like, I kind of think of like that concept of like a think, pair, share, like in the classroom, right? But you translated this now into an asynchronous class where you don't necessarily have to have that conversation in real time. They can, like you said, they can be logging on at different times, but they still know that they have that connection with that person. And I would also think about like accountability, you know, that like accountability buddy, you know,
Yeah.
that can be that source of check-in and keep each other going along and get to the finish line.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I would say so too.
So shifting gears slightly, because one of the things that we talk about on the podcast a little bit is making sure faculty, we have these sort of assignments that we go back to all the time because we feel that they work and they work well. But we also like to talk a little bit about maybe an assignment or activity that didn't work well. Because we think it's important to explore those moments because we learn so much from them.
Mm-hmm.
So the question I have, is there an assignment or activity that you attempted to do in class and you were like, nope, that didn't work? How did you handle it? Have you used it again and changed it? Or was it just, well, students, that didn't go according to plan. Next week will be better.
I think so. I was using these cards. They were called table topic cards. Basically, it's a stack of cards you get in this, box, and you pull a card from the stack, and it has these really interesting questions that are questions we don't normally think about on a regular basis. And I remember I would take my stack of cards and I would have students draw a card off the top of the stack, and I would walk around the class and they have to, and the reason why I did that is because I didn't want them to see that I didn't choose this for you. This is kind of the very random. You get the question that you pulled. And I remember there were several students who looked at I would have them flip their card over and read their questions out, aloud to the class. And I remember several of them say, well, I don't even know how I can write about this. Like one of the questions was, if you had 3 items that you could take with you on a, if you were in the survival mode, on some remote island somewhere and you're there and you needed to be rescued, what 3 items would you take? And I found that was a very kind of perplexing question for some folks because maybe they hadn't really thought, most of the time we're not in that scenario. So you're not necessarily always equipped to give an answer right away. Right. And so I feel like some students were like, I don't know necessarily what I should say because they're not thinking on that level in that moment. This is what I'm going to write about. In other words, if you give them an advanced prompt, they have time to kind of mull it over, think about it, and know what they're going to say. But when you give it to them kind of right then in the moment, spur of the moment, there some students have a hard time with figuring out what they're going to say within that moment. Some are very much methodical in the sense that they need more time separate from the prompt to really kind of cultivate what they're going to say. Others can be quick on their feet and think right then and there. So I found that I had to kind of stop that activity because I didn't want to make some students feel like that something was amiss with them if they didn't have an immediate response to a question. So what I started doing is I would give them the card and then I would say, well, look over it. And then I'm going to give you guys the entire class to think about what you want to say. And then they have to write journals about it. And I said, now, if you can't write your journal today, here in this sitting of this class right now, take it home, think about it. And if that card doesn't resonate with you, just ask me for another card and I'll give you as many cards as you want. But I want you to write something. And so I would allow some students to take it home and they would come back with a page full. That's another thing I started having my students do. I had them start buying composition notebooks. Like they had to buy the real deal, black and white marble.
Yeah, those are fantastic. I have a bunch over there.
You do?
Yeah, those are my class notes.
Oh yeah.
Anybody want to teach 101 English?
That's how I know you're an English person. You know, you have those as on your bookcase is it's a staple of what I would think of.
Yeah.
You know, as a practitioner.
I knew you were going to talk about them, so I just had to make it look like I know what I'm doing.
Right on. Yeah. So I loved it because they got into buying them. Like I told them, like you choose one that you really like. It has that you feel like has some design or aesthetic that would inspire you or invigorate you or going throughout the semester.
Yeah.
Like little fun things like that I would have, but they had to have one. That was
write every week.
Every week they had to write journals every week, and I used to play lo-fi hip hop while they did their journaling. Which I had one student tell me, he said I had not thought about how much music can induce like deep thought and that kind of like not deep thought, but induce like the kind of writing that he was able to do. And I thought, I learned that too. I didn't really know, but this particular like genre, lo-fi hip hop, I didn't know about this until my 13-year-old told me about this. And so she said,
I have to look into it.
You have to, it's so, when you start playing it, it's like the most relaxing, but it brings out the best writing. I use it all the time when I'm writing, and I feel like, I don't know if it's placebo effect or not, but I feel like I am Toni Morrison when I'm writing.
Yeah.
And I throw on lo-fi hip hop, I'm like, oh yes, I'm gonna win thousands of prizes for this. And yeah, I feel like my writing just gets that much stronger. But I started playing it during the journal sessions in class, and students really like calmly write. I don't see any stoppage of a pen anymore.
Wow.
So I don't know. Maybe it's a science to it. I don't have any empirical data to back that up.
I just have to move away from my disco that
Go down to Summers.
That would work.
Yeah, you think I have Donna on? Donna Summers, come on.
Well, I like the fact that like one of the changes is giving students the space to think about like whatever the topic is. Because sometimes, kind of like me and Taboo, sometimes it just doesn't come right away, right?
Right.
I just need the time to step back and to think through it a little bit more. I also used to have students do the composition notebooks. Because I think it was just great to essentially say, this is just for your class, right? This is just for writing.
Yeah.
These are the things that you'll put in it. These are the things that I'm looking for. Because when I would do it more often, I always would have stickers.
Oh, did you use stickers?
Yeah, I had them available.
Yeah.
So if they wanted to put stickers on it to make it their own,
Make
right?
it fun.
Yeah, why not?
Yeah.
Most of the time they go, stickers. But in the end, they love it, right? Because it is theirs.
And it's a tool that we most associate with reward and positive reinforcement from the time when kids are little kids,
Yeah.
But I'm like, I started using stickers this past semester, past fall semester, and I got the smelly stickers too. So like the scratch and sniff ones, that smelly may not have been the best word, but the scratch and sniff ones, So it was a hit because the students say like, I want that one, or I want that one. The one chocolate smell like chocolate, and they liked it. Good reinforcement, positive reinforcement.
I would think it gives like students the opportunity to like reflect on the other things that they're learning in the class, right? If you think about the context of like 16-week class or an 8-week class or whatever, and yes, you're learning the concepts and you're learning how to write these styles of papers or whatever, but they're also going to be learning other things along the way, right? That they don't necessarily get to work into a graded assignment where if they have this journal, they can be reflecting on it. And I personally use like journals for work and for like my personal life and going back, a year later or something and looking back, or 10 years later in Brian's case, because I'm assuming that went on is maybe 7
You're
years.
probably right.
Okay. What were you doing or thinking about at that time?
Wrong.
Yeah. What have you been? 14 years?
About 15.
15?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So going back and like looking at how things have changed, how your teaching has changed like over the years. Do you feel like your teaching style has evolved, like especially maybe in the past like few years, or just since you joined the college?
Yeah. When I first started, Instagram had just started as a social media platform. And I remember I was teaching 0980, and I had a small class at that point. I think maybe 10 students were in that class. And I remember one of my students, we were doing all my neighbors, on my neighbors activity. And someone said, who prefers to start using IG? Well, they didn't say IG, Instagram over Facebook. And all of these people would move, right? And at that time, I didn't know what Instagram was. And I'm like, what is that? Like, what's, I had heard of Snapchat, but I hadn't heard of Instagram. And so I remember jumping online, like, what is this Instagram thing? I gotta figure this out.
Right.
So I go on there and I saw that it popped up, and I thought, this is gonna be the next big thing. Because it has the pictorial element where people can put pictures, and it hadn't really become what it is. It wasn't then what it is now, where it was more text, you could put more text on there for people to write stories or share their thoughts or comments or whatever. And because it was more image-based social media platform, but now it involves more text. And I thought that in that time, to see that social media has completely transformed our sense of being in society 10 years ago or 12 years ago or 11 years ago now, my students thought about the world differently because social media wasn't as ubiquitous as it is now versus now. So students write every day through social media, but because it's not in the academic context, sometimes they don't understand it. It can translate. So whereas before I never referenced social media, I'm like, may come or go.
Right. I would never do it.
Who knows if it'll stick around?
Right.
I don't know.
This is a fact. Books are here forever.
That's right. Like, I didn't know. And so as it became more and more integral to how people communicate, which was probably 3 or 4 years ago, I thought I have to figure out a way to use that apparatus to help them see their skill set in writing, even with reading, because I have several students who say, well, I don't necessarily write on Twitter, but I read a lot on Twitter.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't hear that 11 years ago when I first started. Students, when they were reading a physical copy of a newspaper, or maybe they were reading texts that were coming through on their phone, or they may be reading whatever was posted on Facebook, but it wasn't a wide array of different elements of them reading within the social media world. Now they probably have 10 different separate accounts within social media world.
Yeah.
So they're constantly seeing texts in different mediums and platforms. And I am trying to leverage that, because even though they may be reading, because you never know what you come across. Sometimes you may come across information that's accurate. Sometimes you may not. Yeah. Oh, yeah. You didn't know this?
I didn't know. I thought everything on was accurate.
Which is what we try to teach information literacy to our students. So this point, like, how do we? It's perfect for it.
Yeah. What was said? Do you think that's accurate?
Right. How do we fact check this? Do we know
That's exactly how I started using social media. It's like they're reading, like you are doing exactly what I want you to do in this class, but you're doing it a completely different type of level than I want you. Like you're looking at stuff, you're reading it, you're making an assessment on it, you are then analyzing it, you're synthesizing it when you tell your friends and you laugh about whatever you just saw.
Right.
Like all these things I want you to do, but now we're just shifting sometimes the topic that we're talking about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought it would go away too.
Yeah. Because it felt to me, it was a fun, kind of nice change of pace of maybe your everyday work life, or you would log in and read what's going on with your family or friends on Facebook.
Right.
And I thought, I knew Facebook probably would be, and Twitter I knew probably would be, but now you have so many. TikTok, who knew that came out of like
Yeah.
it kind of wow, this TikTok is taking off. It's, I think, probably one of the most popular, if not the most popular social media platforms today. And
Which is one I do not have.
I have one, and I'll tell you why I got one. I got one because I started learning through, again, my 13-year-old, who at the time was only 10. She would say, well, Mom, there's this fun dance I want to learn.
Mhm.
And she would play the music, and she says, but you have to go on TikTok to record it. And I'm like, why can't we just record it on my phone and I'll just play the music in the background? She's like, that's not fun. She's like, plus everybody can't see that. And I'm like, okay, but I want to keep, well, how do I do it? So I'm a very private person. So I didn't want people,
Right.
just having access to it, and people who I don't know, especially when it comes to my children. And so she's like, well, you can make a private account, Mommy, and only our family that you allow as friends would see it. I said, okay, that's a good deal. So she started
So
dancing.
this is your 10-year-old telling you all this,
At that time,
which
in
is the other thing
2020.
that blows my mind. Kids telling me exactly how all technology works, and I'm like, where did you get that information from?
Right.
And it's accurate, right?
It's accurate.
I don't understand.
No, right.
Where does
I had
knowledge
to-
come from?
Where
I
did
don't
it-
know this.
That was my same question to her. I said, how do you know the sophisticated nature of how to use this tool?
Right.
Well, all my friends are using it. What? You're only 10. How is that
Right.
possible? It's got a whole, thing of friends that are just on TikTok. Yeah, they're doing all the dances. And I said, okay, well, this is trending in the direction of like, this is how she socializes.
Right.
That's how kids socialize today.
Yeah. So might as well incorporate it into your class as much as you can. Though students have asked me to do TikTok videos about stuff that I'm teaching, and I'm like, no. The
Oh,
last,
you mean like record a TikTok and then put it on TikTok?
I don't know. They just say TikTok.
Ah.
Like they want your lecture, basically.
They want me to do it, right? So
Yeah.
record me. Yeah, I don't know. Like things pop up. I'm dancing and I point at things. Like thesis.
Because there are several educators doing that.
Yeah, not me. You don't want to see that.
Yeah, it's either for you or not. That's how I feel about it.
Yeah.
I would think too in like English classes, you talk about audience, right? Like all of these different platforms have like you're tailoring the message either to your audience or the way that it's delivered. Like, talk about stressing out time, like, the Twitter, the 240 characters, like I can't say anything in less than 240 characters, and so
Mhm.
I would think that in your discipline, specifically English, gives you that opportunity to really kind of like unpack, okay, like who's this audience? What's the delivery?
Mhm.
Do you ever do like assignments where they have to actively use like social media in one of the assignments, and do they ever?
The only reason why I haven't done that, where I'm requiring them to do it through social media platform, is because I'm not comfortable asking folks who don't have an account already to create an account. That's the only reason why I chose not to take that route,
Yeah.
for a methodology of my teaching
Sure,
or pedagogy
sure.
of my teaching.
And that makes sense. Like if people don't want to join TikTok or join
Yeah.
Twitter or whatever, or
Yeah.
have their I think about like the introverts of the world.
That's
I mean,
right.
they don't want to have all of that information and sharing who they are like out in the world like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think at some point we're going to have to, because I believe that the LMS, apparatuses that we're using, whether it's Blackboard or whatever, they're going to start incorporating those elements more and more. I see that being the future of an LMS. They're going to start having those elements. So I think it's trending that direction.
Like TikTok's going to be integrated with.
Or it'd be Blackboard's version of TikTok.
Okay.
Yes.
With-
Or be
with
Blackboard's
what work
version
half
of
the time.
TikTok. Yeah. But that's exactly my thought sometimes when I get frustrated. But I mean, it's already integrated on there now because YouTube is technically a social media platform and we can post as many YouTube videos as we want. I couldn't do that in Blackboard when I started using it 9 years ago. You know, they didn't have a space for me to upload YouTube videos.
Right.
I used to have to literally copy and paste the link and put it in my on my page, but I don't have to do that anymore as much.
So I wonder, is there a way, we should ask this to Ola, like, is there a way to make song lists, like we were talking about your playlists in your classroom, if you post it on YouTube? Or like could they make, is there something that is already integrated that makes a channel of all of these songs?
You could.
Discussion boards?
If you had a YouTube account, like Brian, you mentioned, you know, this podcast, but if you had a YouTube account, you could have your own YouTube channel. And if you typed in your name and it's a public YouTube channel, you can integrate that across the college.
So what are you excited about, like, next semester or next year? Like, what are some new things that you are going to look towards trying in some of your classes, maybe? Projects.
I've been thinking about this, and this Chat GPT controversy that we are reading more and more about, and how, you know, this AI is pretty invasive, right? Let's be real. It's really changing the landscape of how educators within the humanities are teaching writing and how, you know, what the expectation of writing is from a student. And I was reading articles most recently about a professor from Yale, I believe it is. Don't quote me on it. I think this professor was from Yale. And his rationale why he uses that technology, AI technology, in his classes. So he allows it to be a part of one of the assignments. He uses it to teach paraphrasing. So if he gives students a writing prompt, they have to take the writing prompt and then submit it to this Chat GPT to kind of create the paragraph for them. And then they read the paragraph, right? And they would, you know, however they would need to, like, whatever happens from this paragraph being written by this AI, they would then have to translate that themselves. So they have to paraphrase that. And it's their paraphrase. So in other words, there's their paraphrase match the AI version of what they would have turned in if they didn't, you know, if they weren't necessarily using integrity right. You know? And so he's teaching students that, hey, these Chat GPTs are, you know, these AI apparatuses that are writing these papers for students that are not using integrity to create their writing. And it basically is teaching them these apparatuses are creating writing in a way where you have to, first of all, read it to determine, is it close enough to, if you're a student who's, again, not engaging in integrity and you're submitting it as an assignment that doesn't necessarily, but you have to read through it first before you submit, most of the time, you would think, right? To see, is this going to fly? Is, you know, perhaps it is or it isn't. You're reading it, right? So the engagement of reading it, saying to yourselves, well, okay, how can we use this with integrity? Because we have to go with the times, right? How do we use that tool with integrity? So I've been thinking about, I downloaded an app it's a Chat GPT app where you can ask it a question and then it'll like pop up. It's like a text message actually. Have you heard of it?
I've heard of it. I don't.
I have it on my phone and it's really cool. Like, it's like you're talking to a robot. So I'll ask, you know, how do I bake, you know, chocolate chip cookies? That'll be a question that I send to the Chat GPT. And you know, whatever the robot would create, it would generate an answer and then it will, you know, send an answer back. And sometimes the answer is like a short 4 or 5 line response, or sometimes it's longer than that.
Here's Trista.
Yeah. I wish you gave me the nearest Trista. It
To
doesn't.
create chocolate chip cookies.
First, you must get your flour.
It's some butter.
Make sure it's softened.
That's right.
You know.
Fire up the stove.
Oh yeah. So I was playing around with this tool because I wanted to see. I had read an article, and I think it was in the New Yorker, that's going to eventually replace Google as a search engine. So it's now I don't know if this is the case or not. I mean, Google is going to be around for a very long time, I would think. But there this article that was written, this particular individual who's familiar with AI, an AI expert, was basically saying more and more students are going to gravitate to using that as a search engine. It could complement what they're already using with Google, or it may they may use it instead of using Google. Who knows? But I thought I need to kind of be familiar with this technology, and maybe I can use it in addition to having them use Google to help them search for some answers, and then give them the information literacy piece to investigate and interrogate whether the information is accurate or not. So it's almost kind of like I want to set up like a scavenger hunt where I give them certain questions and they have to use these various AI platforms to get their answers. And then they all compare, well, because you guys all have the same question. What did your AI tell you? And what did your AI, because they would use different AIs, but to see how these answers from these various AI platforms, are they closely aligned? Are they vastly different? Well, why are they vastly different?
Mm-hmm.
So just getting them to think about how information literacy works outside of the realm of, an academic database.
Yeah. I think no matter how much we try to say we don't want this in our
Yes.
classrooms,
It's coming.
it's coming, right?
Yeah.
There's not any
Fast
point
and furious.
look at our history. Is there a point where technology we're like, no, that shouldn't happen?
Yes.
It was like, oh, okay, it won't happen.
Right.
Nobody stopped Instagram, nobody stopped
That's
TikTok,
right.
really,
Right. Like it is something that's happening, and I think it is. I think you're absolutely right. Trying to find a way to work with it is probably the best bet, as opposed to trying to continue to work against it. Though I would say, like, part of me at this point, sort of in its infancy,
Mm-hmm.
letting students know about it, I'm always a little like, I don't know. You might not know about it right now, and I don't want to be the one, right?
Yeah.
To sort of open the door to those possibilities. But I think you're right. Trying to find a way to work with it is probably the best way to go.
Well, because I hadn't.
And I've seen Terminator, so I see how this is all going to end up.
Yeah, right. Hey, because you just
Skynet and everything like that.
or the Jetsons.
Right.
Remember the Jetsons predicted like the cell phone and all those.
Oh, that's true. That's a much more pleasant future. So you're positive. I went straight to the
The
annihilation
Jetsons
of
are
the man.
less dystopian, right?
Yeah.
And
Right.
you've softened your butter and turned your
Yeah, right.
stove on
That's
before you
right.
make your cookies.
That's right. Yeah.
Don't worry, in 20 years you'll call me like you were right, Brian. Total Terminator out here now.
Right. Yeah.
Before we went on, you told a story about the school in New York, about what they found on YouTube that you and your class did. And I figured with the time we have left, if you would share that.
Yeah.
I
So
think it's great.
thank you, Brian. That's for allowing me to share this story. And it was a pleasant surprise. So I was checking email. I was in my office one morning, checking work email. You go through the routine of accessing your email, responding to email, and we pretty much get the same set of emails every day, right? Whether it's an email about whatever committee work we're doing or an email about, student needing support or help. But this email came from a professor of a university or college near New York City. And I can't remember the name off the top of my head of the college, but she reached out and said that she showed the YouTube video for Colored Girls, which was a production that we had done at Metro in 2017, because I was teaching that choreo poem. It's called a choreo poem by Indazaki Shangai. And she said that she had been, I guess, searching for quite some time to find a video that had the full production of For Color Girls. And I had been as well, prior to us doing the production at Metro, I went on YouTube to see if I could find, because you know, Brian, you and I when you teach drama, it's designed to be performed. So when you're reading it as a student, you want to give them more of an experience with that play. And that play, because that was one of the first times that I was teaching it, I had not had a lot of like resources to access to show them the visual element of it, the audio visual element of it. So I would go on YouTube and I would search, and I couldn't find anything. So finally, this was right around the time that faculty could access grant money through the Cleveland Humanities Collaborative to do, any kind of work within our pedagogy, our scope of pedagogy that we wanted to do in the classroom. And I thought, this is the perfect time for me to see if I can work with a gentleman who taught theater here for a lot of theater classes here for a long time, Jimmy Woody. He is a theater person through and through. He was an actor in New York City at some point. He teaches stage acting and film acting here. He did for several years at Metro. So I had an opportunity to meet him and learned that he also was a director. He had directed several different plays throughout the city. And I said to myself, I have to make sure that I figure out some way to work with him for us to create this production for Color Girls, because I want my students to experience Ndazaki's work. I want them to have that experiential knowledge that when they walk away from seeing the production of it, it makes the reading that much more fulfilling in terms of the learning experience. So we were able I was able to work with Jimmy. He, because he is someone who is a well-known name in the city, a lot of local stage actors and actresses know him. So he reached out to several people we had auditions here. We were able to, I think we had 11 women in the production, and it was fabulous. And we got the resources to put it on the big stage here in the auditorium at Metro. The theater department was involved. We had the stage crew, everybody that did all the audio of it and the props, and it was like way more moving parts and way more work. I learned about the theater world in ways I hadn't really known about it and what it means to put on a production. I just thought it was like, okay, you just stand up on the stage.
Stand on stage. Say some words.
Say some words.
Fantastic.
That's it. It's the stage left. No, I didn't know, you had to have the microphones a certain way. You got to have the props set up a certain way. There's certain kinds, they call it staging, where people were standing certain kind of. So I learned a lot from Jimmy, and the women who were involved they did a fascinating job, fabulous job bringing that story to life for the students. So I invited, of course, my class had to be there, but I invited the whole campus to come and experience it. And so when we did the production, Jimmy actually he recorded it, and he put the recording on YouTube. And it had been on YouTube for, I want to say 6 or 7 years by the time she emailed me. So when she's emailed me saying, she was really appreciative of the fact that she found it for her students to watch in class, and that gave her an additional resource to share with her students, I felt very affirmed that something that was instinctual in me and I could help bring to fruition with resources and really great folks to work with, it made me that much more invigorated and inspired to do other things like that in my career. So now that we're back on campus and we're getting back to accessing pre-pandemic resources, the buildings are opened up, students are back on campus. I want to do something like that again in the future, if I can.
That sounds like a great experience.
Yeah, it was. It was really cool.
Well, thank you so much for your time today. Really enjoyed the conversation.
Yeah, it was
We
fun.
could probably keep going on, but
But before we go, what's your Browns prediction for the new season? I know we're quite a ways away from it. You know, it's baseball season's about to. Come on, Brian. What's
how many
gonna be?
games do they play now? 36?
If they increase this one more time,
It'll happen.
are you a football fan, Kara?
I'll show up for the like pre-party and the
That's the
yeah.
only time you really need to.
Yeah.
The rest of it's kind of
the
boring.
fourth quarter. Like I want to know
At the Muni lot?
What's
Yeah,
that?
have you been to the Muni lot?
Yeah.
So I told Brian that I love tailgating, but I've been to the Muni lot when there's no tailgating, just the park,
Mhm.
and I'm like, oh my gosh, I have to hurry up and get where I'm going. You
Yeah.
Are
know?
you a season ticket holder? Or are you like
No.
in your seat at the start of the game?
No, so I'm not a season ticket holder. My husband's a big believer in being warm and in the house, and I am too. So we watch the game together in our living room
Yeah.
with our kids.
Which is the only way to watch a game, honestly.
When you can yell.
Well, that and you can everything you just said is accurate. You can be warm, you can see what's happening, right?
Yep.
That's perfect. I watched the Cavs game and my daughter was like, oh, can we go to a game? And I'm like, no. Why would we? You can see it perfectly right here.
Play all of the plays can be replayed on
Right.
live television. It's like
And I don't have to worry about driving or traffic or any
Yeah.
of that other stuff.
Yeah.
They do
Yeah.
all the
Or even
close-ups
people at that
and-
point. I don't have to worry about that.
well, because it's a crowd, right? So
Yeah.
you got to be kind of comfortable being in the crowd setting.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
So to your question, 10 games they'll win.
Do you think we're gonna make the playoffs?
No,
Okay.
no. I think I told you sort of my idea of the
More
Browns.
realistic. Yes.
They set it up to screw it up. So I just imagine that's what will happen once again until things have been proven
Yeah.
otherwise.
Yeah, I understand. You know,
I'm getting the
we're gonna face
taboo sweats right now. I'm just thinking about this. I feel like I'm on the spot, but
Yeah.
we'll
Yeah,
go
what's
10
your
wins.
prediction?
My prediction is I think we're gonna win like 10 games. I would
That's
say
right.
10.
Okay, so 10.
I think double digits because we were close this. I think we had 9 this year.
I don't know. 7.
Maybe 8.
Clearly, we follow it closely.
We do follow. I'm a huge Browns fan. I think we're gonna make the playoffs. I'm gonna be very optimistic, and although recent history has shown that we have had some really tough losses, that
Just
You know.
different personalities. You're a Jetson future personality. I'm a Terminator future personality.
The optimist.
such a great way to describe that.
So I don't see the playoffs. I see a barren field of pain and destruction. Well,
So we're gonna have to come back and have like you back on another episode next
I would
time
love
next
that.
year. See what you have learned and what you've done with the chat GPT and see
yeah,
where the
that'd be
Browns
fantastic.
ended
I
up.
thought you were going to talk just about the Browns. But yes, the chat GPT.
Yeah.
I think that'd be great. Or this episode will just be broken up into multiple ones because it's so very long.
Right.
No, I appreciate the time.
Thanks for
Thank you
having
so
me.
much. Hope
It's
the
really
rest of your
nice, and I
semester goes
appreciate it.
well.
Yeah, I had a good time.
Yeah, thank you.